I now call committee to order, and we did leave off last, and again, apologize for the technical difficulties, but we left off partway through Ms. Clendening's presentation. Ms. Clendening, please go ahead and continue presentation.
Okay, thank you. My name is Krista Clendening, and I'm a wills and estate lawyer in Winnipeg, and I work primarily or a lot with families of persons with disabilities. So I'm an individual who does a lot of planning around the existing EIA disability program, using the EIA Disability Trust strategy and utilizing things like Henson Trusts to provide for family members with disabilities. So I'm presenting today on some of the strategies that currently exist in the current program under EIA disability. And I just want to comment on the importance of those planning strategies and carrying them through into the new program or expanding on them into the new program. So of course, it's really difficult to provide much perspective on the new disability support program when so much of it is going to be set out in the regulations. And so the existing regulations and the exemptions that are provided that I think are particularly important include the EIA Disability Trust. So that trust is a specific trust that is under our Manitoba program. There's that $200,000 limit that currently exists for these trusts and RDSPs. We really want to see that carried through as a continued strategy for people that are under the disability support program, and even potentially expanded to allow them to set aside more money or have amounts that may be inheritances that are received by them or insurance payouts or things like that. When they have these lump sums that come into their hands, we don't want to see them see their support cut off or see them lose their housing that they're in or their other programming. So that EIA Disability Trust is a really important creature that we have here in Manitoba and we want to see continued. The other thing with that trust is the current rule that the money that comes out of it can only be spent on disability related expenses. That is a very difficult thing for people to navigate, given that we don't have anything in the regulations that sets out exactly what those expenses are. So if we're seeing this kind of strategy carry through, it would be helpful to see more information about what is entailed in a disability related expense, or possibly reducing or eliminating that criteria for payments out of these trusts. We're already limiting the amount of money that's being set aside there. I'm not sure that it even needs to be restricted to being spent on disability related items. Could be expanded there. Also, Henson Trusts, something that's been brought up today by other presenters. Currently, Henson Trusts are a strategy that is something that can be used in Manitoba. Henson Trusts are a way of setting up a discretionary trust for a beneficiary. That beneficiary may be a recipient of EI disability or other government support. It allows for family members to provide for that person and provides a discretionary source of support for them to top them up when their government support is not meeting their needs or allowing them to live up to their full potential and the full lifestyle that they could otherwise enjoy. Both this EIA Disability Trust and the Henson Trust are strategies that we want to see continued. We also want to see more clear explanation about their being exempt. We want caseworkers to understand these strategies better. The clients that I deal with so often are struggling with the EIA caseworkers, the program itself, trying to navigate the complexity of this program, that they're having to hire a lawyer to work through it, which is, I think, speaking to how complex this program is and that it probably needs to be simplified, or resources need to be provided so that people can navigate it on their own. They shouldn't need a lawyer to go through to figure out their exemptions and what they can have in terms of assets. So really providing some resources for individuals that are recipients under this program, ensuring that there's clarity among these exempt options. Other things that are currently allowed: owning a home, having a property that the person that's a recipient of the income support resides at. So sometimes family members will leave the home to that individual so they can continue to reside at that home that may have been tailored for them based on their disability. Seeing that continue into the new act is also important. Receiving gifts. So currently we have exemptions for gifts under the EIA disability program. We would like to see that included in the new program, if not expanded. Additionally, the liquid asset exemption that we currently see under the EIA disability program, seeing that continued, seeing that potentially expanded. We currently have a $4,000 limit for an individual. An ability to encourage saving for people with disabilities. I know it's a very difficult thing when a person with disability is receiving income. You might want to be setting aside funds to go on a trip or do something else or save up for something. That's difficult at present. So overall, with these different strategies that EIA disability recipients are currently able to use, I think it's extremely important to carry them through into the future, expand on them into this new program, ensuring that there's consistency there as well. There are so many families that are out there that have planned around these current regulations, thinking that their family members will be on EIA disability. So I think it is really important to think about those families and making sure that those strategies will still be available if that loved one now switches over to the disability support program. As has been mentioned before, I mean, us working in this area of disability planning and these different organizations that have been presented today, we do see people slip through the cracks, and some of these individuals may be accessing these support programs, but based on the nature of their disability are not accessing other supports, other programs, and in some ways are falling through the cracks. So it would be great to see this new program address some of that, but also just to make sure that these other supports, when they're offered by family members, when someone is lucky enough to have that opportunity for family support, to make sure that that's still an option for them, that they can either be supported by gifts or supported by these trusts being set up. If these options were to be restricted, I would only imagine that family members would start to plan in a way that doesn't leave inheritances or doesn't leave funds set aside for a person with disability, which obviously reduces the funds that are then available to support those individuals and leave them solely relying on government support. I don't imagine that is the outcome that we want to see, and that we want to continue these options for family members to continue to support their loved ones. A couple just other small points regarding the program in general. I guess assessment processes is something that's been touched on. I know people with disabilities are often having to go through various assessments in order to get access to services. If there's any way to coordinate the types of assessments they're going through, or using an assessment, for example, for the disability tax credit, if they qualify for that, maybe they should be, that's evidence that they qualify under this new program. So if there's any way to kind of reduce the amount of assessments these individuals are having to go through to meet with doctors over and over and paying for these assessments sometimes, that would also be ideal. Another point that was raised and dealing with the financial resources inclusions, the income from any source, that addition that's coming into both the Manitoba Assistance Act and this Disability Support Act, certainly poses a lot of concern to me, because I don't really know what that's intended to mean. I don't know what we're going to see in the regulations that addresses the income from any source. I know it's raised some flags for myself and others in terms of, is this going to include payments that are made from an EIA trust or from a Henson Trust? What is this provision meant to include? So I think, I'm interested in getting more clarity on that point. Another piece that was raised was the inclusion of spouses and common law partners and dependents and their financial resources being attributed to the recipient. That may be going too far, in my opinion. And on the common law partner as well, the definition that we're seeing in that act, on my review, is just very open, very immediate. Any relationship that the person is residing in. I think more clarity with that definition whether it's implementing a year or 6 months or one of the other definitions that we commonly see in our legislation in Manitoba would also be ideal. I suppose I will leave it there as my comments since I'm about out of time. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Clendenning. Do any members of the committee have questions for the presenter? Minister Squires.
Just want to say thank you, Ms. Clendenning, for your presentation tonight here. And you spoke a lot about some of the barriers that are existing in the current system. And of course, that is the intent of this new Disability Support Act, is to create greater ease in which clients can receive benefits that they are entitled to. And so really appreciate your presentation, and you provide a lot of thoughtful feedback that we will take it back and reflect on. Thank you.
Ms. Clendenning.
Thank you.
Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Ms. Clendenning, for your presentation and providing a very interesting perspective on this bill. I was wondering two things. What jurisdiction would you think would benefit the most for people with disabilities in Manitoba in terms of estate planning? And from a legal perspective, when so much of the bill is left into regulations, how does that affect estate planning for people when they're trying to make long-term decisions for family members that have disabilities?
Ms. Clendenning.
So I'll address the second question first. Yeah, in this case where so much of this program is left to the regulations, it's of course very, very difficult to plan around it. So I know I've had a number of clients this year that have held off on their disability related planning, held off on setting up trusts and things for family members because they're concerned about what's happening with this legislation and they don't know what direction things are headed in. And there's just uncertainty and a little bit of fear there as well. So, I mean, I think it's made it difficult to plan. I understand why the program has been set up in that way so that you have more control through the regulations, but it certainly caused difficulty with planning. On the first question, I'm not sure that I understood the jurisdiction that would benefit. Could you just rephrase that question for me?
Ms. Adams.
Not a problem. You indicated that there were issues and concerns regarding trust funds and discretionary funds that were available and seeing it go forward and the change in with Bill 72. Is there any provincial jurisdictions that you know of that you would like to see Manitoba use going forward?
Ms. Clendenning.
Yeah, I'd have to do deeper digging into that to look at the programs. I know who's done. Alberta has done a recent program. I think Saskatchewan. I haven't done enough work in those jurisdictions to have a good enough handle on their programs. So it'd have to be something I'd look into more in terms of modeling ours after those individual programs.
Seeing as there's no further questions, Ms. Clendenning, thank you for your presentation and thank you for taking your time to be with us this evening. I'll move on to the next presenter, Whitney Hodgins. And moderator, I ask the moderator to invite them into the meeting. Please unmute yourself and turn your video on.
Hello.
Ms. Hodgins, please go ahead.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for hearing me speak with regards to Bill 72 today. I know there are a few familiar faces here that I recognize, and no doubt they recognize me. But for those who do not know who I am Whitney Hodgins, and I am a Brandon, Manitoba resident. Not so long ago, I was also the NDP candidate in the recent federal election, and I am a person who lives with autism. I have been an advocate for the past decade here in Westman, fighting for people living with disabilities and mental health needs. But what people don't know about me is that I started out with a lot more humbler beginnings. I was actually on EIA for 6 years of my life. This was not by any choice of my own. I was basically unable to find work because I was actually living in a time that didn't fully accept people living with disabilities, and we didn't have legislation in place like the AMA today. So you can imagine what living with a permanent disability in a program not designed for people like me was actually like. I had to prove medically that I was disabled every 2 years, and they had strict deadlines on getting that done. If it wasn't done properly or it was late, I would lose $200+ in my monthly allowance, which actually put me at risk for homelessness on more than one occasion. I actually remember for many moons rationing my food to once a day because the price of rent, groceries, etc. was very difficult to manage. My motto in life back then was no cent went unspent, and that was a motto that I lived by. I eventually left EIA because it was a system that went from a program designed to help people get back on their feet or to support them to a system that really made you feel like you were imprisoned and that you were set up to fail and that you were meant to stay there. I remember one time spending all the money that I had on groceries for that month, and instead I bought a pair of shoes. And that's just one of other instances of that happening. If I stood any chance of succeeding in society, ultimately what would have had to have happened was I would have had to have masked my symptoms, pass off as normal, and deny that my disability existed at all. That's just to survive in society. That's what I had to do. In fact, I'm masking right now. But having to live in poverty and continuing to feel like I was a prisoner within a system, I couldn't continue to live in that lifestyle anymore. And I wanted to be just like everyone else. When I had heard about Bill 72 coming to the forefront, I was no doubt excited like everyone else, despite not being able to benefit from it. But finally seeing something like it after going through the hardship I went through filled me with hope that finally we were on the right path. However, once I got to see the document in its entirety, it broke my heart to see that very little actually changed from the old system versus the proposed system. So much so, it reminded me of just a copy and paste function that exists on all of our technology. More importantly, the prolongment severity clause within it. The definitions for these terms are incredibly vague, and I can also see how restrictive this language can be moving forward. When you use a transitional word, such as the word "and," it creates the mechanism of criteria that no doubt would create a very difficult situation for many Manitobans who are currently on the EIA system living with a disability. Essentially, it would make this legislation out of reach for many. There are issues with this language because, quite frankly, if you have medical documentation stating you have a disability, that should be proof enough. Having language of this nature expressed in Bill 72 has gone from a bill for all people with disabilities to only a fraction of people living with disabilities that it will actually help. For a bill that touts that it consulted folks, that it's supporting people, I don't think this is what anyone had in mind. My other concern is how we assess people for this program and how they define a common law partner. This places not only restrictions on someone's relationships with someone and how they're supposed to be reflected, but it's also a significantly big red flag for me. I am one of many women who live with a disability who are survivors of domestic violence. By placing the entire financial burden on the spouse or making someone dependent on their common law partner to finance the needs of the person with a disability, it opens the doors for abusers to target victims and the victims having zero way of escaping. Escaping a domestically violent situation cannot be done safely or successfully if you have no money because you're financially dependent on an abusive spouse. It speaks to me a disaster waiting to happen. And we already know that domestic violence has gone up, not down, in the COVID-19 pandemic. But my biggest issues with this bill is it grants the government the power to place a lien on a person with a disability's home or property. My main concerns with this clause is that it's in direct violation of the UN Declaration of Persons with Disabilities. The actual article is Article 12, Section 9, or Section 5 rather, that states state parties shall take all appropriate and effective measures to ensure the equal rights of persons with disabilities to own or inherit property, to control their own financial affairs, and to have equal access to bank loans, mortgages, and other forms of financial credit, and shall ensure that people with disabilities are not arbitrarily deprived or of their property. By putting a lien on someone's home, you're doing exactly that, whether you mean to do that or not. It's a huge overreach that should not be ignored by anyone, and the only solution that needs to happen here is clear exemptions need to be made, or this section needs to be scrapped entirely. I commend the government for wanting to create these supports, but at the same time while reading this, it's only made me realize that this bill only says that you're making a deal with the devil, and we all know that a deal with the devil is not a deal worth shaking hands on. I commend those who work tirelessly to make this bill come to the forefront. However, until some amendments are made that substantially change the game on this bill, that not only looks at the recipients of today, as well as the recipients of tomorrow, I cannot in good faith support a bill that only adds fuel to the never-ending fire that oppresses people living with disabilities. I thank everyone for listening to my speech today, and I look forward to hearing your comments.
Well, thank you for your presentation, Ms. Hodgins. And does any member of the committee have a question for the presenter? Minister Squire.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hodgins, for your presentation tonight, and you spoke very eloquently about the challenge that you had in receiving eligibility, and that is one of the intents of this bill, is to make it easier for people with severe and prolonged disabilities to not be required to go back time and again to have their disability reconfirmed by a medical professional and to be reconfirmed with the department. And we do believe that it's a more streamlined process. So that is certainly something that this bill is intended to do that will make life easier for people with disabilities, as well as providing targeted supports for people living with disabilities. That is something that is yet to come in this bill, and I certainly look forward to sharing those details with yourself and many other members of the community.
Ms. Hodgins.
Although that is great to hear, it also doesn't address the other concerns that I have with regards to liens on homes or property, or, you know, our rights to even have a relationship with somebody. Like, we are not innocent people out there. We do have needs, and we are within our right to find love and be loved and reciprocate love. And with this bill, it prevents that from happening and actually creates a toxic, dangerous situation. And so I also am curious to know what other things, other than, you know, we're not going to make it mandatory every 2 years you claim that you're disabled. I need to see more than that.
Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Ms. Hodgins, for your presentation and sharing your thoughts and concerns about Bill 72 and raising some real red flags regarding this bill. I was wondering if you could provide me with what your thoughts are on so much of this bill being done in regulation and having it rely on the minister, and not having it be the minister could just change their mind and change regulations on a whim with a stroke of a pen.
Ms. Hodgins.
That's definitely another big red flag for sure. It seems to be the pattern of multiple different bills now that it just gets deferred to the minister. And unfortunately, I kind of sit back and go, well, where's the accountability clause within the powers of the minister? Who do they answer to? Because right now I have yet to see a strong foundation to prove to me that there is going to be an accountability there.
Mr. Moses.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I really just wanted to take a minute to thank you for sharing your story, the story you shared about your struggle, about the abuse that you experienced, and I'm very sorry about that. But I just wanted to thank you for your bravery to share that with us all this evening. And I hope that obviously, this current bill as it's written has, some things that don't address all of the issues that you've outlined. And I'm glad that you brought those forward today so that we can hear them, so that decision makers in this building can eventually make bills that will help people like yourself across our province.
Seeing as there are no further questions, the time for question and answer period is over. Ms. Hodgins, I thank you for the presentation and taking the time to join us virtually this evening. Thank you. I now call on Lorna Canada Benagas-Miza and ask the moderator to invite them into the meeting. Please unmute yourself and turn your video on. We have called Lorna once and she's not on the call, so we'll drop her to the end of the list and revisit her when we get to her later. I now call on Jessica Croy and ask the moderator to invite them into the meeting. Please unmute yourself and turn your video on. Welcome, Ms. Croy. Go ahead.
Hello. Thanks for the opportunity to let me speak. We need, we need a program for people with prolonged and severe disabilities. We don't need to keep proving that we have a disability. It is very tiring for me to have to keep proving that I have a disability. The people who qualify for this program have disabilities that will not go away at any point. The support for this program will needs to make it so people who with disabilities can live the best lives in the community. We want to be able to contribute to the community and feel fully included in society. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Croy. And I'll ask any members of the committee if they have any questions for the presenter. Minister Squires.
Thank you very much, Ms. Croy. It is a pleasure to see you here, and I look forward to our next opportunity to visit and discuss some of these very important issues in greater detail. And I appreciate your sentiment that it's not fair that you would have to go and seek re-eligibility for disability that you know is certainly not going to go away. And I'm very pleased that this program will provide you with a more dignified support program and benefits that that will certainly be with you for a long time and not have you go through unnecessary burdens to receive those benefits. So thank you so much for being here tonight. It is lovely to see you, and stay well, my friend.
Ms. Croy?
Thanks.
And Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Ms. Croy, for joining us this evening and your presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. It's so important that we ensure every Manitoban, no matter their ability, feels included and supported by reducing their barriers. So thank you so much for your presentation tonight.
Mr. Lamont?
Yeah, to Ms. Croy, I just want to thank you very much for your presentation. Really appreciated it. And yeah, it's really important that nobody be treated as less than. And I think you made a wonderful, you made a great point of that tonight. So thank you so much.
Seeing as no further questions, Ms. Croy, again, thank you for your presentation this evening and taking the time to join us virtually. I will now call on Sharon Grahan and ask the moderator to invite them into the meeting. Please unmute yourself and turn on your video. It looks like Sharon is not on the call, so we will be dropping her to the bottom of the list. We'll move along to Roberta Hoover, Hoogervost. Unfortunately, she's not on the call right now, so we'll be dropping her to the bottom of the list. And I will now call on Lorna Canada Venegas Miza and ask the moderator to invite them into the meeting. Please unmute yourself and turn your video on. Welcome, Lorna. Please go ahead.
Oh, I apologize for earlier. My computer went down. I had to try and jump back into the room. So I guess I'm coming here today as not only a parent of a child with a disability, but also with a grandson who's just 7 years old now that also has a genetic disability. What I went through with the EIA system, no parent should have to go through. And I really kind of had some big hopes when I heard about this bill coming out, that there would really be some, I guess, some definition between the two, and that there would be more rights and not basically what we got with this new bill. I look at this and I see children who potentially will never own properties if they stay within this, in the event that the government could then potentially put a lien against the properties. Can you leave properties to them in an estate? Maybe not, because they could end up losing them as a part of what's being proposed in this bill. Children who, I mean, when my daughter very first went through this, the government said because we lived in a rural area, in order to get my child resources, I needed to move her to the city so that she could go to school. I did that only to find out that all of her funds, except for $100 a month, it was going to cost her for rent. And that was a shared rent in an apartment with other roommates. That left her with $100 a month to feed herself, all of her hygiene products, and any other expenses she had. The resources that were promised at that point were non-existent. So basically, she ended up displaced from her family in the city with almost nothing to live on. That required us to make multiple trips back and forth from a rural area into the city to try and provide resources for her that she wasn't getting from the system. I was hoping to see something more defined in regards to how children with disabilities are supposed to continue to go to school, how they're supposed to continue to live. She had no transportation in the city, and I think several speakers have already spoken to this, and my understanding is that will now be by the wayside, but every 2 years she was having to arrange for doctor's appointments to reconfirm the disorder she was born with. She still had it. It wasn't going anywhere. It was there from day one. And so for her to try and maneuver the city on her own with no transportation to try and meet all these requirements and jump through all these hoops for EIA was unmanageable. And oftentimes it actually declined her health. As a result, it created excess stress, it created excess anxiety, that things that didn't need to be there were now there. And so I'm hoping with the grandson now coming into the system, I was hoping to see some pretty big changes here. And then they were not the changes I was hoping to see. In regards to all monies being accounted for, I guess we don't know what the actual dollar figure that they would have to live on in a month would be. But if it's consistent with what they're currently getting, that really leaves people behind. They are really never going to be able to move forward. There are no incentive programs out there for people with disability that want to try and work and get out into the workforce. They turn right around and they deduct it completely off their check, which leaves them less. So I watched as my daughter was trying to work part-time jobs, walking across the city in the middle of winter, trying to get to these jobs to find out that she didn't end up making 1 more cent to live on in a month. So those the types of incentives that are necessary to help people to get off of this EI system and try and move themselves forward, those incentives need to be somewhere written in there, and I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing that every cent that they get coming into their hands is going to be accounted for, and it's going to be removed. When my late husband passed away, she was in school, and she was qualified for the orphan's benefit. That too, every cent of that was taken, it was deducted completely from her monthly income. So those are the types of things that I'm not seeing being addressed in any part of this bill. It looks to me like it's the same EI system that's been in place for a long time with actually more barriers to prove. And, you know, even more stringent barriers in regards to the income that potentially could be there to help them to move them forward. And so, I mean, when I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I have a daughter, I would really hate for her to end up in a relationship with a partner, then end up being removed from the EIA system, only to find out she's in an abusive relationship that she now cannot get out of. So, I mean, those are things that we do need to look at. And we also know that statistically, women with disabilities have always ranked extremely high as being victims in domestic violence. I would not want to see anyone's daughters being placed in that situation, or for any person with a disability to become so dependent again on someone else for their care that they could not get out of and move themselves forward. That's all I had for you. I'm, you know, as a parent, I was kind of hoping for a whole lot more out of this bill than what I'm seeing. And I'm not thinking that it's addressing the real areas of need and the real segregation that needs to happen. I guess if anybody has any questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Lorna. Do any members of the committee have questions for the presenter? Minister Squires, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ms. Canada Venegas Mesa, for your presentation this evening and for sharing with the committee your experiences with the program. One of the intents, of course, with the separate program for people living with disabilities is to provide them with additional benefits for their shelter, for their ongoing activities, and as well as to achieve a fuller life. And so that is certainly one of the intents of this legislation, is to create that category which would reduce barriers for people with disabilities, and then also to provide those targeted supports that you had spoken of in your presentation. Just my quick question for you, if you don't mind sharing, what you'd spoke that your daughter was on EIA program within the disability category. Would you mind sharing with us what year that was, or years?
Lorna?
Yeah, she was at least 5 years before she came off of the system. So that would have been back in, she's been off for just over a year now. And I mean, again, once she managed to pull herself off, it was a real uphill battle for the first full year, because there was no programming in place for her. So you're either on it or you're off. There's nothing in the middle. And so if you don't have family that you can fall back to for some of that, I can see where they would end up being almost that trapped feeling. And I think there was a couple of people on there that spoke about feeling like they were in prison or trapped. It would feel like that. You would feel like you were being forced to go back on. We were able to keep her off. And so far, so good. But you never know, right? You just don't know how things are going to progress day to day.
Minister Squires?
I want to express my gratitude to your daughter through you for her courageous effort, and undoubtedly what you describe as an uphill battle, and just certainly wish her all the success in the world. Thank you.
Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Ms. Canada Vegas Mayes, for sharing your story and sharing the story of your daughter and her work to get off EIA disability. And thank you for the support you provided her in this program. You've highlighted some of the issues you have with the bill, and you said you wanted to see more with the bill. What would you like to have seen in the bill that you feel would have made a huge difference and an impact for your daughter? And you indicated there's a grandson that may need disability support. So what would you like to have seen for them?
Lorna?
I would have liked to have seen some more autonomy, some more ability for them to move forward and pursue, future goals. I mean, even for her to get her education was an unbelievable battle, to go through resources to try and get funding for that. And so I'm hoping that, once my grandson gets to that point, that won't be as big of an issue as it was for her. But for her first 2 years, she had to stay at home and do online schooling, which was extremely difficult. And it took us that 2 years to be able to get her into a classroom. And so the fact that she held off and she managed to get through, and she does have a bachelor's degree today with honors, and she has a double major. And so, I mean, for her to do that, though, was an 8-year battle, where most students would be 4 or 5 years. So those are the types of barriers that those kinds of things have created.
Seeing as there's no further questions, Lorna, I thank you for your presentation and taking the time to join us virtually this evening. We'll now call on Sharon Grehan and ask the moderator to invite them in the meeting. Please unmute yourself and turn your video on. Unfortunately, it looks like Sharon is not on this evening. We will go to Roberta Hoover and ask the moderator to invite them into the meeting. Please unmute yourself and turn your video on. Unfortunately, Roberta is not here either. So at any point during the presentation, if either of them join, we would seek leave to have them do their presentation. Now we'll move on to Bill 232. And, I will now call on Sigyn Olud and ask the moderator to invite them into the meeting. Please unmute yourself and turn your video on.
Good evening.
Welcome, Sigyn.
First, I acknowledge standing on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Honorable members of
Sorry,
Manitoba.
Mr. Olud, I understand that Hansard was not recording this. Could you please go ahead? My apologies.
Honorable members of Manitoba Legislative Assembly, Chair of the committee, Clerk of committees, Chiefs of First Nations, friends and all present, and all those who might come in contact with this document at a later date. Greetings. I think it's important to introduce myself. I'm Segun Olude. I came here over 30 years ago as a student to University of Manitoba to study graphic design. And after that, got a job as a graphic designer and ended up teaching for 11 years at the University of Manitoba in graphic design. And today I have the pleasure, or should I say the privilege, of speaking to you.
It appears that we have a technical difficulty here. Segun, can you hear us? Unfortunately, it looks like there's still technical difficulty. We're going to come back to the presenter here, and hopefully that'll be rectified by that point. I will now call on Rosemary Sadlier and ask the moderator to invite them into the meeting. Please unmute yourself and turn your video on. Welcome, Ms. Sadlier, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And my apologies to the previous speaker who was prevented from moving forward. But let me begin. I'm very honored to be able to provide my deputation to the Standing Committee on Social and Economic Development for the province of Manitoba in support of Bill 232, Emancipation Day. I would like to acknowledge that this land was settled and supported very early by people of African descent, the first named being African translator Matthew da Costa by 1604, and of the ongoing and seminal contribution made by him and those that preceded and followed in Canada's development. I acknowledge the many people of African descent who are not settlers, but whose ancestors were forcibly displaced as part of the transatlantic slave trade, brought against their will and made to work on these lands. We must acknowledge that African Canadians were an integral part of shaping Canadian history, and our history would not be the same without the Black experience. On March 24th, 2021, Motion M36 by MP Majid Jahare was passed unanimously in the House of Commons, effectively making August 1st as Emancipation Day, a national day of celebration, commemoration, and honor. It was adopted in the Senate on June 28th by Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard. But I have carried and championed this initiative since 1995. This date marks abolition, confirmed through the 1833 British Imperial Act that went into effect on August 1st, 1834. building on the resistance and the resilience of our ancestors, and a date that effectively freed the last enslaved Africans here, ending over 200 years of chattel slavery on the lands we now call Canada. To them, much is owed, and to all the ancestors on both sides of the transatlantic slave trade, much is owed. It was a horrendous historical experience that connects us in the present as well. It is a statement of the absolute impact this first global abolition bill effected, fueling abolition movements worldwide. But it went into effect here in Canada on August 1st, 1834. As you may be aware, I have been working to see official commemoration of August 1st since 1995, while with a provincial heritage organization in Ontario, the Ontario Black History Society. Also later, while self-represented, and while the head of the Black Canadian Network. And most recently, as the Royal Commonwealth Society, I'm the second vice president of the national branch, which represents the 54 countries of the Commonwealth, primarily in Africa and the Caribbean. And I'm the equality lead for the Americas and the Caribbean with this organization. However, in 1995, I had joined forces with a social justice advocate from Trinidad and Tobago in formalizing August 1st as Emancipation Day right here in Canada. My efforts were conducted then as now in a nonpartisan manner. We immediately began a process of educating the public and holding receptions at educational talks and outreach. Fairly quickly, the City of Toronto, then Metro Toronto, issued our requested proclamations for August 1st. By October 1996, we had secured a proclamation with the City of Ottawa. I was in Ottawa for many events and met political figures who claimed interest in this, including MP Preston Manning, who then was leader of the Reform Party, who held a reception in support on Wellington Street. By 1999, MP Deepak Obdrai used one of his private members' bills to secure August 1st as Emancipation Day through Bill C-282. It went to second reading but did not pass. He issued this again in 2000, but once more, after second reading, it did not pass. It should be noted that previous Canadian celebrations had waned out following the loss of the popular leaders of the activities, namely Walter Perry in Windsor and B.J. Spencer Pitt of the UNIA in Toronto, which originally had been launched by Marcus Garvey, as well as the popular venues that they used. The greatest show on earth is what they called the Emancipation Celebrations in Windsor, and it was the largest Black cultural event in North America prior to Caravana, and it was closed down by the Canadian police and politicians concerned about the potential for rioting during the 1960s civil rights protests, because of course Windsor and Detroit are inextricably intertwined. Any other celebration at that time was focused on Caravana, which started in 1967, or small, loosely run family events that did not always have the educational nor the strategic direction for the event. My initiatives as the proponent succeeded in seeing the 1990s proclamations issued with the City of Toronto, Metro Toronto, and the City of Ottawa. And starting in 1995, I had created, as I mentioned, annual Emancipation Day events, which included Shouter Baptists and other religious groups, consulates, elected officials, international guests, educational speakers, and food. I persisted in seeking commemoration, and by 2008, on the first all-party unanimous Bill 111 in Ontario, in the Ontario Provincial Parliament, that was put forward by MPPs Ted Arnott, Maria Van Bommel, and Peter Cormos. Emancipation Day was created in Ontario. I was honored to be the keynote speaker at the first contemporary celebration in Windsor at the Caboto Banquet Hall at the invitation of the U.S. Consul General John Ney in 2008, with whom I'd been working on many other Black history initiatives. There were many other celebrations and events that were held at Queen's Park in Ontario with representation from all political parties, as well as the combined celebration that emerged later of Emancipation Day and Simcoe Day that was had international guests, which was held in the presence of, and frankly, initiated by the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, David Onley, at Fort York National Historic Site, some with attendance of 2,000 people. I proposed the idea more recently to MPs Arif Farani, reaching out to him in 2015, as well as Greg Fergus, creating and submitting a parliamentary petition by 2016, and Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard. Bernard took my idea as Bill S-255 to second reading in the Senate, but this was not successful by October 2018. While I was able to help secure the support of opposing forces in the Senate, the session ended. It was then returned to the House and reimagined as a motion by MP Majid Jahouri, who led the successful vote in March of this year. This finally made it Emancipation Day across Canada. And I want to just thank the many who have supported this initiative through signing parliamentary petitions, attending events, keeping their support centered on making this happen. Particularly people in Ontario like Mayor David Miller, Barbara Hall, John Tory, all the way up to the Lieutenant Governor David Onley, and the current Lieutenant Governor, Her Honor Elizabeth Dowdeswell, with special thanks, of course, to the MPs and the senators. In 2020, I held the first international commemoration of Emancipation Day online due to COVID-19, with representatives from Nigeria, Ghana, Britain, the Caribbean, and across Canada. And I have been invited internationally to speak on panels and conferences. So why seek commemoration?
Thank you, Ms. Sadler. Unfortunately, our time has expired. I do thank you for your presentation. Does any member of the committee have questions for the presenter? Mr. Moses.
Thank you so much for your presentation, your passion, your historical information, and it was simply an inspirational speech to hear you, the work that you've done over the years to be pushing for this bill, for emancipation to be recognized in your province and across our country. Regardless of political stripes, it's great to hear that you were able to work with political figures of all different levels, of all different parties. And I think that speaks to how this day, Emancipation Day, can transcend different party lines. I'd like to hear a little bit more about, maybe if you take a minute to finish your comment, but I wanted to ask you about how how this is been used to educate communities and educate people, how emancipation's been used to help people. But you could also take a minute maybe just to conclude your comments, because I know your time ran out there.
Ms. Sadler.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I'll just conclude my comments because in a way they do answer that question, but effectively it's the beginning of a different level of awareness. And I think that in 2021, that's what we're all about. The pandemics have really helped us all realize that maybe there's some things we need to do a little bit differently. And, but I thank you for giving me 3 minutes and I'll conclude my comments. Now, if I can just get to that point, because I was actually going to name you, Jamie, MP Moses. Okay, I'll just jump ahead a bit. Emancipation Day allows for the affirmation of the ancestors. Knowing this helps us all have brave conversations about the issues that we face today and the location of the Black population as a group in this society, their generational deprivation, as well as the inspiration to actively find and carry out those steps that will address anti-Black racism. Emancipation Day means commemorating the harms of slavery and celebrating our efforts to take action in the continuing pursuit of justice. It is part of a process to speak to the reality of the early Black contribution, not just one part of Canada, because it's not just an issue for the Maritimes or Toronto. It is something that is part of the entire country, including Manitoba, from early Black fur traders and explorers through to those who came in as part of the ranching or farming, to Billy Beale or the Porters and their families who helped grow Pilgrim Baptist Church. It speaks to their resilience in coming here, even when the government deemed Black people unsuitable for the climate of Western Canada by the early 1900s. It laid a foundation to build the freedom, to extend and grow opportunities for so many, including Marcus Chambers. And I won't go in to describe who they are because you all know them better than I do. Chimundi, Ife Chiweteru, Uzoma Asagwa. Oh, she's going to kill me for messing up her name. Audrey Gordon, and of course, Jamie Moses, who took the St. Vital seat for the party. And Jamie is one of Manitoba's first Black MLAs, and so conscious and so progressive in moving this particular motion forward. Recognizing the beginning of freedom, freedom to come here, freedom to hold diverse opinions, freedom to participate, freedom to achieve. All of these are values that we all should be able to support.
Seeing as there's no further. Minister Cox, please go ahead.
Can't hear you. You're muted, you're muted.
You're right. Anyways, I would like to thank you so much, Ms. Sadler, for your presentation and being here this evening. It's been a long evening, but we're here because it's such an important issue. I'd also like to thank you for all of the work that you've done, not only to help us establish this important day here in Manitoba, but all of your assistance in helping all of the provinces and, of course, our country, Canada, establish the importance of Emancipation Day in August. So I look forward to passing this important bill, this resolution.
And unfortunately, Minister Cox, we have run out of time, but thank you for your, Ms. Sadler, thank you for your presentation and taking the time to join us this evening virtually. We will move along to our first presenter, who unfortunately had a bit of a technical issue, so we're going to see if Mr. Shagun is back online. I call on the moderator to invite them into the meeting, and please unmute yourself and turn your video on.
Thank you again.
Mr. Shagun, please go ahead.
Once again, I acknowledge standing on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Honorable members of the Manitoba Legislative Assembly, Chair of the committee, Clerk of the committees, Chiefs of First Nations, friends, and all present, and all those who might encounter this document at a later date. Greetings. May I once again introduce myself? I'm Segun Olude. I came here over 30 years ago as a student to study graphic design in University of Manitoba. After a successful career, I ended up teaching there for 11 years, and today I still practice my craft as I do teach all over Nigeria and here in Canada. Same subject. I stand here before you as an individual citizen supporting the recognition of August 1 as Emancipation Day in Manitoba, as outlined in Bill 232, the Emancipation Day Act, tabled before the Manitoba Legislative Assembly. As generally agreed in the people of color communities, and I'm quoting from someone else's, Emancipation Day is about celebrating freedom. Emancipation Day is about learning and understanding the history of slavery in Canada, reflecting on the present-day struggles for equality and preparing for a better future for all of us. There are three main reasons why I support this proposal. One, to raise awareness and provide an avenue for healing from the trauma of slavery. I was born and raised in Nigeria and knew about slavery, but not enough to impact my worldview. It was only after coming here to Canada that I learned about slavery in Canada and its lasting adverse effects on the people who bore trauma, those who continue to carry the burdensome history. It was then that I came to understand the role of our tribe in the larger narrative of slavery. Families were torn apart. People were brutalized. Setting aside a day to learn and understand the history of slavery and how it plays into our current struggles for equality is crucial. Two, to enhance multiculturalism. Canada prides itself as a multicultural country. Manitoba promotes itself with the slogan, Friendly Manitoba. In the spirit of multiculturalism and friendship, an Emancipation Day would create space for learning and sharing stories that would reaffirm all the pieces that make up the multicultural mosaic of which we are so proud. Three, to create a broader path towards reconciliation. We acknowledge that our collective past, we did some things wrong out of ignorance, but now that we know, let us in the spirit of reconciliation accept our mistakes and misdeeds, and purposefully create a better Manitoba for future generations. Let us participate in the bigger effort of reconciliation with the first owners of the land and all the people that gather on this same land. Please, let me share with you today an example of the type of learning one could expect on Emancipation Day, August 1, 2022. Come with me into the future, and I'm presenting to you. My friends, may I offer you the Yoruba concept of Iba Aimo. This comes from the philosophical tradition of the Yoruba. Igba is time, a period. Aimo is not knowing or ignorance. Igba Aimo always refer to a time in the past when we did not know enough to make the right decisions. It is an acknowledgement that some things like slavery was wrong. But now that we know, we have an opportunity to do right. Igba Aimo opens the door to conversation, forgiveness, and ultimately reconciliation. And my final words of encouragement to all present are summed up in this verse I wrote a few days before Thanksgiving. We cannot disregard the beauty and splendor of Canada, especially Manitoba. So I read, today, we know what we know. Tomorrow, we shall know more. Then we shall do more good and live better lives. And one day we shall be at peace with one another and with all creation. It is my hope that there will be a unanimous vote to pass Bill 232 and make August 1st of each year Emancipation Day in Manitoba. Thank you for allowing me the time and opportunity to voice my support. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Alude. Do any members of the committee have a question for the presenter? Mr. Moses.
Thank you so much for sharing your words. I could feel the power and the wisdom when you spoke them to us. So I'm glad you were able to complete them, that we got through the technical difficulties. And I love your 3 points about awareness and healing, about enhancing our multiculturalism, and about helping us find that path towards reconciliation. And I want to show my appreciation for the words that you spoke that'll help us inform us about Emancipation Day. I also wanted to say that I really love your vision for the future about using this bill to educate those who will come next and making our world and our community here in Manitoba a better place. And so again, I just want to thank you again for taking your time to share your thoughts on Emancipation Day and your support for it.
Mr. Alude.
Thank you. And I look forward to working with everyone on making this day the most beautiful in Manitoba.
Minister Cox. Minister Cox, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Alude, for your very, very beautiful thoughts and comments. And, you're absolutely right. When we look at the past and our mistakes, it only makes us look to the future, knowing that we are aware of the mistakes that we made in the past, and really gives us the opportunity to move forward with reconciliation. So thank you again for joining us. I really appreciate it. And again, I look forward to proclaiming Emancipation Day very soon. I believe it'll probably be on Thursday. So thank you again. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.
Mr. Lamont.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I'll just say this, I particularly enjoyed the fact that it was written with an eye to the future, that it's greetings not just for us, but for whoever might read it at some time in the future, because I do think that this is a very important bill. I'm very thankful to the MLA for St. Vital for having brought it forward. And we're certainly hoping that we can get unanimous support for it, because it deserves it. So, and thank you for your words.
Thank you.
Seeing as no further questions, I want to thank you, Mr. Alude, for taking the time to join us this evening virtually and presenting to us. Thank you very much for your time. And again, I do apologize for the technical glitch earlier. This concludes the list of presenters that I have before me. In what order does the committee wish to proceed with clause-by-clause consideration of these bills? MLA Peterson?
2 and then 232.
Is that the will of the committee? Okay, so then, yes, so we will begin with Bill 72 and move on to Bill 232. Does the minister responsible for Bill 72 have an opening statement? Minister Squires, please go ahead.
Very much, Mr. Chair. And again, it's been my pleasure to be here to sponsor Bill 72, which is our government's commitment to a new income support program for persons with severe and prolonged disabilities that promotes the social inclusion of persons with severe and prolonged disabilities, recognizes their unique needs and barriers, ensures that there is a strong support service for strong support for service navigation and service access, as well as removing barriers to help them achieve their full potential. We recognize that many Manitobans living with disabilities struggle to meet their needs and rely on government programs such as the Employment and Income Assistance Program. Currently, persons with disabilities who require income assistance are enrolled in the Persons with Disabilities category of income assistance. However, this category provides benefits to persons with a wide range of needs that includes persons with severe and prolonged disabilities to continuously seek eligibility for their services and programs and the benefits that they're receiving. During our public consultation, we heard from over 560 Manitobans through the online portal, as well as 140 people who attended an in-person session. And we heard of much support for this new income support program for persons with severe and prolonged disabilities. Participants had also emphasized that people living with severe and prolonged disabilities have unique needs and may have targeted supports to help them fully participate in their community. And we certainly couldn't agree more. And that is what we have done in the creation of Bill 72, based on the feedback of many Manitobans through these rounds of public engagement. We have now developed a new income support program for persons with severe and prolonged disabilities. This program will be separate and distinct from the Employment and Income Assistance Program and will provide income and shelter supports as well as other benefits to be established in regulation. Manitobans, of course, have asked for a separate program for people with disabilities for many, many years, going back 15, 20 years. In fact, I heard from one person who had said to me that this has been something that was asked for since the 90s. And so our government is very pleased to deliver on this requirement that Manitobans have been asking for, which would change the Disability Income Support Program, would provide people with disabilities a more dignified support program, one that they would have reduced barriers to receiving access. It would also reduce the burden of medical professionals as they are continuously being sought for the eligibility purposes. Their assessments are being required for this eligibility, and we certainly don't think that that is a good use of their time. They certainly could be providing support to their patients in eight ways that are much more meaningful than continuously reassessing people with disabilities just for the sake of receiving benefits. So this is a program that has been developed with thoughtful consultation of many, many Manitobans. I do just want to address some misinformation that Members Opposite has put on the record about Manitobans who would be disqualified, and quoting a number of 12,000 Manitobans who won't be classified under this program. That is completely erroneous. I don't know where she gets that number from, but I just want it to be recorded in the record in Hansard that that is a false allegation. This program will improve the lives of many people with disabilities in the province of Manitoba. It creates separate, distinct programs for people based on their needs. And we certainly are wanting to make enhancements to the supports and the benefits that they receive that will be in regulation. Again, one of the things that I had highlighted earlier was that having the exemptions and some of the direct benefits outlined in regulation does provide for that flexibility. I can think of many instances in the last year and a half alone since the start of this pandemic where there have been pandemic-related supports for people with disabilities that were easily exempted through regulation and didn't require a legislative amendment so that the benefits could flow without any clawbacks from their regular benefits program. And that is something that I believe government needs to maintain, is that ease in which we can provide exemptions for new benefits that possibly are on the horizon, and to really reduce those barriers for people who need these benefits. So With that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to conclude my comments and certainly look forward to continued debate on this bill. And I certainly hope that all ministers or all members of the Legislative Assembly would support the creation of a new Disability Support Act, something that has been asked for well over 25 years, and our government is finally delivering on.
We thank the minister. Does the critic from the official opposition have an opening statement? Ms. Adams.
Thank you. It is important to ensure every Manitoban, no matter their ability, feel included, supported by reduced barriers in providing equitable access for all. While the Minister of Families bill increases support for those with permanent disabilities, it leaves some Manitobans behind. As I've stated before, a main concern that remains with Bill 72 is that it amends subsection 5 bracket 1, which strikes out physical and mental incapacities or disorders that are likely to continue for more than 90 days and substitutes it impacts or disorders likely to continue for a period of more than a year. This change means that disability supports will only be available to Manitobans who have amounts to a permanent disability that has a disability last longer than a year. It appears that people with disabilities that have their conditions recessed may be kicked off their supports. 22,000 Manitobans currently receive disability benefits. The Department of Families have said themselves anticipates that 10,000 people will not meet the new definition of disability for the purpose of this act. That means going forward, 12,000 people with disabilities could be negatively impacted as a result of the Minister of Families bill. Simply put, people with intermittent disabilities are going to be left behind. Overall, the net effect of this bill is hard to tell. Some people may receive no supports, and there are no guarantee that the current level will maintain supports they have. All disabilities should be taken seriously, and intermediate disabilities is likely to continue for more than 90 days is incredibly difficult for someone to deal with, as it may be exasperated if they are not able to receive their financial supports. There is a better way to help people with disabilities, whether it is short or long term. During a once-in-a-century global pandemic, the minister could probably support all Manitobans with disabilities without kicking anyone off. This would reduce the stress and improve the quality of life for thousands of Manitobans. At this time, no expense should be spared when it comes to helping and supporting our province's most vulnerable citizens. Thank you.
We thank the member. During the consideration of a bill, the preamble, the enacting clause, and the title are postponed until all other clauses have been considered in their proper order. Also, if there's an agreement from the committee, the chair will call clause and blocks that conform to pages, with the understanding that we will stop at any particular clause or clauses where members may have comments, questions, or amendments to propose. Is that agreed? Agreed and so ordered. We will now consider clause by clause of Schedule A, the Disability Support Act. Shall Clause 1, Schedule A, pass? Clause 1, Schedule A is accordingly passed. Shall Clause 2 through 6, Schedule A, pass? Clauses 2 through 6, Schedule A, are accordingly passed. And Ms. Adams? I heard a no.
No, okay.
I hear a no. Are there any questions? Ms. Adams?
I have a question for 6 bracket 2.
Go ahead. Ms. Adams?
Do you have to acknowledge me?
Ms. Adams, go ahead.
We heard from a number of people today at the presentation where they raised concerns regarding applicants that have spouses or common law partners and how that will impact them negatively. I wonder if the minister could explain the rationale behind this.
Minister Squires, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And if I understand the members opposite correctly, she's wanting to understand about clause 6.2a, all income from any sources received by the applicant or recipient, their spouse or common law partner, or any of their dependents. I'd like to just inform this member that that is certainly a clause that is routinely found in every jurisdiction in Canada regarding income benefits, employment and income assistance benefits, and is something that was supported by her government for 17 years when they were in office. And going back even further than that, throughout the entire history of this benefit being available, this has been maintained by her government for decades.
Seeing no further questions, shall clauses 2 through 6, Schedule A, pass? Clauses 2 through 6, Schedule A, are accordingly passed. Shall clauses 7 and 8, Schedule A, pass? Clauses 7 and 8, Schedule A, are accordingly passed. Shall clauses 9 and 10, Schedule A, pass? Clauses 9 and 10, Schedule A, are accordingly passed. Shall clause 11, Schedule A, pass? Clause 11, Schedule A, is accordingly passed. Shall clauses 12 through 16, Schedule A, pass? Clauses 12 through 16, Schedule A, are accordingly passed. Shall clauses 17 through 19, Schedule A, pass? I hear a no. Are there any questions? Shall clause 17, Schedule A, pass? Clause 17, Schedule A, is accordingly passed. So clause 18, Schedule A, pass? Clause 18, Schedule A, is accordingly passed. Shall clause 19, Schedule A, pass? Hearing a no, are there any further questions? Ms. Adams.
I have an amendment.
Ms. Adams, go ahead.
I move that Schedule A to the bill, the Disability Support Act, be amended by adding the following clause, 9(1). The report must be laid out the following fiscal year covered by the report. A, the number of recipients of disability supports and the total amount of disability supports provided. B, the number of recipients of shelter support and the total amount of shelter supports provided.
It has been moved by MLA Adams that Schedule A to the bill, the Disability Support Act, be amended by adding the following after Clause 19, Section 1. Total support to be detailed. 19, 1.1. The report must set out the following for the fiscal year covered by the report. A, the number of recipients of disability support and the total amount of disability support provided. B, the number of recipients of shelter support and the total amount of shelter support provided. The amendment is in order. The floor is open for questions. Minister Squires, please go ahead.
So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to just inform the committee that this information is already available in the annual report that is tabled each year. And if the member would like copies of those annual reports historically, I'd be more than happy to show her where this information is detailed in those annual reports. No legislation prescribes that this detail what needs to be outlined in the annual report, because each year there are additions that need to be added, and certainly other pieces of vital information that we do include in annual reports in our efforts to be transparent. And so this detail is certainly not something that is required, but I would be more than happy to provide members opposite with detailed annual reports going back since our government formed in 2016.
Ms. Adams, please go ahead.
So you'd have no problem supporting this amendment then?
Minister Squires.
As outlined in my previous answer, this information is already available.
Is the committee ready for the question? Ms. Adams.
With the amount of, in this bill, with the amount of things that were referred to regulations, it was felt that there needed to be more accountability with this legislation, and to ensure that people with disabilities were receiving amounts and that they need, and were having regular increases. And this was a way to ensure that people with disabilities and with more transparency. So I hope members opposite will be supporting this amendment.
Is the committee ready for the question? The question before the committee is as follows. That Schedule A, it has been moved by Ms. Adams, that Schedule A to the bill, the Disability Support Act, be amended by adding the following after Clause 19, Section 1. Total support to be detailed, 19.1.1. The report must set out the following for the fiscal year covered by the report. A, the number of recipients of disability support and the total amount of disability support provided. B, the number of recipients of shelter support and the total amount of shelter support provided. Shall the amendment pass? I hear a no. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
In my opinion, the nays have it. A recorded vote has been called. All those in favor, please raise their hands.
1, 2.
All those opposed, please raise their hands.
1, 2. We'll do that. Yeah. Okay, so now we will conduct the vote.
And we will now count the votes of virtual members.
Honorable Mrs. Cox? Could you please say?
I vote no.
Honorable Mrs. Cox votes no. Yeas 2, nays 3.
The amendment is accordingly defeated.
Now we're going to put the question back on resolution 19.
Shall Clause 19, Schedule A, pass? Clause 19, Schedule A is accordingly passed. Shall Clauses 20 and 21, Schedule A, pass? Clauses 20 and 21, Schedule A, are accordingly passed. Shall clauses 22 and 23, Schedule A, pass? Clauses 22 and 23, Schedule A, are accordingly passed. Shall clause 24, Schedule A, pass? Clause 24, Schedule A, is accordingly passed. Shall clauses 25 and 26, Schedule A, pass? Clauses 25 and 26, Schedule A, are accordingly passed. Shall clauses 27 through 31, Schedule A, pass? Clauses 27 through 31, Schedule A, are accordingly passed. Shall a preamble of Schedule A pass? The preamble of Schedule A is accordingly passed. Shall the enacting clause of Schedule A pass? The enacting clause of Schedule A is accordingly passed. Shall the title of Schedule A pass? The title of Schedule A is accordingly passed. We will now consider clause by clause of Schedule B, the Manitoba Assistance Amendment Act. Shall clauses 1 through 3, Schedule B, pass? Clauses 1 through 3, Schedule B, are accordingly passed. Shall clauses 4 and 5, Schedule B, pass? I hear a no. The floor is open to questions. Ms. Adams.
My question is from subsection 5, 1A, where it was strike 90 days and make it 1 year. Where did the minister come to that decision, and why the increase?
Sorry, Ms. Adams, we'll have to just do it clause by clause here. Shall clause 4, Schedule B, pass? Clause 4, Schedule B, is accordingly passed. Shall clause 5, Schedule B, pass? I hear a no. The floor is open to questions. Ms. Adams, please go ahead.
If the minister could please explain why she changed it, the legislation changed from 90 days to 1 year, and how that will have negative impacts on people with intermediate disabilities.
Minister Squires.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And this is moving Manitoba in line with all other jurisdictions in the country. And as I explained earlier to the member, we have currently one system that was upheld by her government despite repeated requests for the creation of a new income support program. And now we are branching off into 3 different programs. There will be the Employment and Income Assistance Act as it currently is. There will be a new 2 separate programs for people with episodic disabilities as well as severe and prolonged disabilities. This is more in line with other jurisdictions and certainly something that community has asked for.
Ms. Adams.
Can the minister indicate when the bill for episodic disabilities will be made available, and why they're not both being done at the same time to ensure Manitobans have the supports they need?
Minister Squires.
So I just like to clarify for the member that that new category is created in section 5(1)(a).
Ms. Adams.
Subsection 5(1)(a) says in part before subclause by striking out physical or mental incapacities or disorders that are likely to continue for more than 90 days and substituting it incapacity disorders likely to continue for more than 1 year. So people who have disabilities that last longer than 90 days but less than a year are not going to be eligible for this new program. So what will happen to the people that are in between those times? You have indicated that there will be a program for them, but there's nothing for them in this legislation. So when will that program be made available?
Just a reminder that members should be putting their question through the chair. Minister Squires.
Thank you for that guidance, Mr. Chair. And we haven't got to clause 18 yet coming into force, but this act would come into force on a day to be fixed by proclamation.
Seeing as there is no further questions, shall clause 5 Schedule B pass? Clause 5 Schedule B is accordingly passed. Shall clauses 6 through 8 Schedule B pass? Clauses 6 through 8 Schedule B are accordingly passed. Shall clauses 9 through 12 Schedule B pass? Clauses 9 through 12 Schedule B are accordingly passed. Shall clauses 13 through 15 Schedule B pass? Clauses 13 through 15 Schedule B are accordingly passed. Shall clause 16 Schedule B pass? Clause 16 Schedule B is accordingly passed. Shall clause 17 Schedule B pass? Clause 17 Schedule B is accordingly passed. Shall clause 18 Schedule B pass? Clause 18 Schedule B is accordingly passed. Shall the enacting clause of Schedule B pass? The enacting clause of Schedule B is accordingly passed. Shall the title of Schedule B pass? The title of Schedule B is accordingly passed. We will now consider clause by clause of the main bill, Bill 72, the Disability Support Act, and amendments to the Manitoba Assistance Act. Shall clauses 1 through 3 pass? Clauses 1 through 3 are accordingly passed. Shall the enacting clause pass? The enacting clause is accordingly passed. Shall the title pass? The title is accordingly passed. Shall the bill be reported? Agreed? The bill shall be reported. Does the bill sponsor the honourable member for St. Vital have an opening statement? To clarify, we're now moving on to Bill 232. Does the bill sponsor the honourable member for St. Vital have an opening statement? Yes. Mr. Moses, please go ahead.
Thank you. I first want to thank for the many community partners who helped to bring this idea forward in our community here in Manitoba, who were bringing this idea forward, who are sponsoring it, who are advocating for it. Groups such as ACOMI, such as Black History Manitoba, many others across our province. I also want to thank the speakers who spoke towards this bill today, Rosemary Sadlier, as well as Segun Olunde. They were very passionate and powerful, and I think it all goes to show the amount of people who really support this idea of recognizing Emancipation Day in our province. And we're so happy that it's also being recognized across our country. Because Emancipation Day is about learning about our collective history, about telling people that more complete history of our country that includes slavery and includes the history of freedom. It's about recognizing Emancipation Day as a step forward in recognizing Black and African Canadian history as part of Canada's entire story, and teaches the next generation about some of the forgotten parts, some of the shameful parts of our past that we must learn to not repeat again. Emancipation Day is not just about honoring that past history and those past lives, but it's clear, as we heard from the presenters today, that it continues to affect the lives of Black people, African people here in Canada, and everyone in our country. So it's time for us today to recognize Emancipation Day, to recognize the role that Black enslaved people played in the building of not just our country, but specifically building our province here in Manitoba, as well as all of their descendants who continue to make our communities better. The contributions of Black immigrants who are just arrived and just arriving now, to the Black immigrants who arrived 50 years ago, like my parents, to those who have called Manitoba home for generations, going back to the earliest European settlers. Those Black Manitobans show strength, they show resilience, and they make the Black community in Manitoba what it is today. So by celebrating Emancipation Day, it is an important part of us learning our history and educating all Manitobans so that we can reflect on our current actions and build for ourselves a more inclusive future. Ultimately, Emancipation Day is about celebrating freedom. And so I look forward to working together to pass this bill unanimously. Thank you.
We thank the member. Does any other member wish to make an opening statement on Bill 232? Seeing as none, during the consideration of a bill, the preamble, the enacting clause, and the title are postponed until all other clauses have been considered in their proper order. Shall Clause 1 pass? Clause 1 is accordingly passed. Shall Clause 2 pass? Clause 2 is accordingly passed. Shall Clause 3 pass? Clause 3 is accordingly passed. Shall the preamble pass? The preamble is accordingly passed. Shall the enacting clause pass? The enacting clause is accordingly passed. Shall the title pass? The title is accordingly passed. Shall the bill be reported? Agreed? The bill shall be reported. The hour being 9:48, what is the will of committee? Committee rise.